In the early 1800s, the most powerful naval force in Asia wasn't an imperial navy. It was a pirate confederation commanded by a woman who began her life as a prostitute. To understand how she built her empire, you must first understand the world that built her. To understand Shi Yang, the woman who would one day be known as Zheng Yi Sao, you have to look at the pressure cooker she emerged from, the city of Canton, known today as Guangzhou. This city, nestled at the mouth of the Pearl River, was the financial artery of the Qing Empire and arguably the most globally important port in the world. Imagine a city exploding with wealth, but rigidly contained. This was the era of the Canton system, established by the Qing Dynasty. For over a century, if you were a European merchant, British, Dutch, French, American, you could only conduct business in one tiny district of Canton, known as the 13 Factories. This was a bizarre, contained environment. On one side, you had foreign super merchants moving astronomical amounts of silver, silk, tea, and porcelain. These traders were confined to their luxurious, heavily guarded compounds, but their money flowed everywhere, creating colossal wealth for the small number of Chinese merchants known as the Kohong, who were licensed to deal with them. But step just outside the factory walls, or look past the gilded mansions, and the contrast was stunningly brutal. The vast majority of the Cantonese population lived in grinding poverty. Many were farmers forced off their land, or boat people, living their entire lives on small sampans, tiny boats, in the crowded, sewage-choked delta. The only thing flowing faster than money in Canton was desperation. It was into this volatile, vibrant, and utterly transactional world that Shi Yang was born, sometime around 1775. The flower boats, or Chuan, were floating pleasure barges moored on the Pearl River. They were far more than simple brothels. They were the centers of elite entertainment. The women on these boats existed in a harsh social hierarchy. They had no legal standing and few rights. But to survive, especially at the high end, required a level of social intelligence that Shi Yang quickly mastered. She wasn't just selling a service, she was gathering information. She learned how to read men, how to negotiate, how to manage books, and how to command a room filled with powerful men. These skills were her survival mechanism, and they would become the foundational tools of her pirate empire. The environment that birthed this unique blend of desperation and opportunity was a direct result of imperial policy. For centuries, the Qing Dynasty maintained the Haijin, or Sibem, a policy that repeatedly restricted or banned maritime trade and migration. The Qing court was a land power. They viewed the ocean as a source of chaos, rebellion, and foreign influence. They neglected their navy, letting their coastal defenses rot, focusing instead on internal stability. This institutional neglect created a massive, systemic blind spot. The Qing rulers had unwittingly ceded control of the entire South China Sea, the most important trade route in Asia, to anyone ruthless and organized enough to take it. And one man was already proving himself to be the most ruthless and organized of all, Zheng Yi. The piracy Shi Yang encountered wasn't the romanticized lone wolf kind. It was massive, organized, and politically charged. Historically, it started with desperate fishermen and coastal dwellers turning to brigandry. But the real game changer came from the south, specifically from the Haijin rebellion in Vietnam. In the late 18th century, a massive civil war engulfed Vietnam. The Haijin rebels needed naval muscle, and they didn't care where it came from. They began actively recruiting Chinese pirates, giving them official titles and granting them safe harbors in Vietnamese ports. This provided Chinese fleets with two things they desperately needed: political legitimacy on paper, at least, and a secure place to refit, recruit, and sell their stolen goods, far from the reach of the crumbling Qing navy. This is where Zheng Yi enters the story. Zheng Yi was born in the 1760s, a pirate from a long line of them, but he was a visionary. He saw that the various pirate groups of the Pearl River Delta, which spoke different dialects, fought over turf, and were mostly ineffective against large, well-defended merchant convoys, were wasting their potential. He didn't just want to raid, he wanted to control the entire system. In 1801, Zheng Yi pulled off a stroke of political genius. He brought together the 6 major Cantonese pirate factions: the red flag, the black flag, the blue flag, the white flag, the yellow flag, and the purple flag. He didn't defeat them all. He convinced them all that unification meant exponentially more profit and security. They signed a formal alliance, with Zheng Yi designated as the overall commander of the massive Red Flag fleet. He was a brilliant strategist and a master administrator, transforming a loose confederation of gangs into a highly structured, almost military organization. He instilled discipline, organized his forces into squadrons, and, most importantly, established a shared treasury system. This meant that the spoils were distributed based on rank, not simply who won the fight. This unity was revolutionary. Within a few short years, the Red Flag Fleet became an untouchable, multicolored empire of the sea, numbering up to 600 large junks and tens of thousands of men. They were far better organized, better equipped, and more disciplined than the pitiful navy the Qing government could muster. Zheng Yi's name struck terror into the hearts of any merchant sailing the South China Sea. This empire needed a consort, it needed a partner in power, and that's what brought Zheng Yi to the flower boats of Canton and face-to-face with Shi Yang. Legend says Zheng Yi was so captivated by her beauty, he had her abducted and forcibly married. It's a great story. The pirate king steals the beautiful courtesan, but the truth is likely far more complex, calculated, and interesting. Historians suggest Shi Yang's reputation preceded her. She wasn't just a pretty face, she was known to be sharp-witted, intelligent, and a phenomenal financial administrator. She ran a business that dealt in complex logistics, high-stakes finance, and volatile human ego, precisely the skills a pirate fleet needed to grow beyond simple raiding into a true, self-sustaining state. The most compelling version of history suggests she was summoned, or at least strategically pursued, not as a prize, but as a potential partner in business. And if she was summoned, she went into that meeting knowing her own value. This is the core of her ascension. The negotiation that followed the initial meeting, the marriage agreement, was revolutionary. Shi Yang did not ask to be a consort or a figurehead. She asked for power, structured and formalized. Her demands were likely threefold. She demanded to be married to Zheng Yi, but also to have full, joint command of the entire Red Flag Fleet, not just an advisory role. She required a full seat on the Pirate Council of Captains, the ultimate decision-making body of the Confederation. She negotiated a specific large share of the plunder and the right to maintain her own personal fleet and treasury within the greater Confederation. Why was this revolutionary? Because it was a demand for structural change. She wasn't asking for influence through her husband, she was demanding institutional power in her own name. She wasn't just marrying a pirate, she was merging businesses. Zheng Yi, to his eternal credit, and as a testament to his ambition, recognized that the woman in front of him wasn't a distraction, she was the missing piece to his logistical and administrative puzzle. He agreed. Shi Yang had legally and ceremoniously become Zheng Yi Sao, which simply means the wife of Zheng Yi. Her early years with the fleet were not spent idly. She immediately brought the flower boat's administrative rigor to the Red Flag Fleet. We can tell her influence was massive because, under their joint command, the chaos of piracy began to coalesce into actual governance. She likely oversaw the development of financial administration as she brought accounting and auditing to the shared treasury, ensuring everyone was paid, reducing internal conflict, and improving morale. She formalized rules and reporting structures, making the massive fleet easier to manage and command from a central point. Strategic planning. The raids became more coordinated, targeting high-value shipping lanes and coastal settlements with brutal efficiency. Under their joint command, they became an economic and military powerhouse. They levied taxes on coastal villages, collected protection money from passing merchants, and even issued their own customs documents. By 1807, Shi Yang had risen from a flower boat to become the co-ruler of a pirate empire. She had power, wealth, and influence beyond imagination. They were the undisputed rulers of the South China Sea, but the sea that had given her everything was about to take it all away in an instant, leaving her alone and surrounded by enemies. That ascent, from flower boat to co-ruler of a six-fleet naval power, is simply incredible. Shi Yang proved early on that her mind was a far more valuable asset than any cannon. The true story of Zheng Yi Sao and how she stepped out of her husband's shadow to become the supreme commander of a pirate nation after a sudden devastating loss is one you won't want to miss.